Hello there, this is Mr. Richards. With Year 10 mock examinations approaching, I thought I'd put together a quick presentation giving you some more information about what to expect during the mocks. Okay, so firstly, when are the mock examinations? Well, the first series of mocks for Year 10 take place between the 26th of June and the 5th of July. There are more mock examinations which take place when students reach Year 11, and they happen in the November and December of Year 11 and also in March. So at the time of recording this presentation, we have 10 weeks until the mocks begin. Next week, on the 22nd of April, it's a good time for you to start to get revision materials together and to start to develop a plan. It would be sensible to start revising from approximately the 29th of April. That gives you 8 weeks with half term in the middle to do some preparation for those mock examinations. So now that you know that the mock examinations take place in June and July, you'll also want to know exactly when each exam is taking place. Well, that exam timetable is currently being finalised, and once it's completed, it will be both uploaded to the Uplands website and also emailed to parents and students as well. This will contain information about when your exam takes place, but also which paper you'll be sitting and how long it lasts. So what is a mock exam? Well, it's a practice paper, which is very similar to the sort of thing you'll be sitting in the summer. Very often there'll be real papers from previous years. Of course, you won't know which year the paper will come from, but it will be very similar to what you'll be doing in the real thing. One thing to note about the importance of mocks is that any revision that you do for this series, that's going to be highly useful when you come to the real thing. If you create a bank of flashcards, for example, which prepare you for Maths Paper 1, then clearly that resource is still there for you when you prepare for the real thing. So it can really help you to get ahead of your revising for the real thing. It's important to think about why mocks are important. They allow you to practice examinations in real world conditions, and that's a really good opportunity to work on exam timings and exam technique as well. It allows you to get into good habits and routines with independent revision so that you're really well practiced at that for your actual GCSEs. You'll feel confident taking assessments in formal conditions. We really don't want the first time that you're sitting in the exam hall to be your real GCSEs, so it's a good chance to be really familiar with that process and that setting. And it also allows you to consolidate knowledge that you will need to take forward into Year 11. And actually, learning, revising and testing yourself on key information is a really good way to embed it. Mocks also allow us to pick up on a few silly mistakes that students can make. Sometimes they answer more questions than they need to, sometimes they might answer the wrong sections. So it's a good chance for any mistakes that are going to be made in practice conditions, so that can be addressed before the real thing. Teachers can then give feedback on the strengths and weaknesses as perceived from the mocks, and then any reteaching of key concepts can follow on from that. Another key question is, what should you revise? And in the next few slides I'll be showing you where to find important information about revision guides and how you can source those. In order to find key information about revision guides, we've put together some information on the notice board of Edulink. So if you or your son or daughter log into Edulink, you'll see in the main menu that there is a button for notice board, and so the first step is to click that button. Inside the notice board, you'll see some folders which relate to Year 11 revision. If we take geography as an example, if you were to click on the PDF for geography, it would take you through to some key information about resources which would be helpful for revising that subject. Here's an example of what the geography information page would look like, and you can see that there is a section for the revision guide. And if you use that link and put that into any search engine, it'll take you through to a place to purchase the revision guide, which is shown on the right hand side. Once you've purchased your revision guide, it will have a useful contents page, and essentially it sets out all of the information which needs to be prepared for the final GCSE. It's then just a matter of matching up the relevant topics with the paper you'll be studying for the summer mock. So now you know what to revise, it's also really important to think about study skills and which revision techniques are proven to be really effective and which ones perhaps are less effective in terms of memorising information. On screen is a really useful video which gives 3 really good tips in terms of revision. I recommend pausing this video and just typing into a search engine how to study TED Ed, and that will come up for you. And it's about a 5-minute video which gives you some really interesting insights in how to revise. So to quickly summarise some of the key information from that video, it states that some of the preferred techniques that students use, which is to read and reread and highlight information, whilst those are important steps in the revision process, they're not particularly effective on their own in terms of getting things into the long-term memory. The recommendation is that students take the material in revision guides and turn them into self-test materials, and that repeated testing has been proven to be a really successful way of getting it into the long-term memory. There's a bit more information later in the presentation about how to use and create flashcards to do this, but essentially testing yourself makes your brain work hard, and it's that racking of the brain which helps to strengthen the memories of the key information. It's important to spread work out, and you've got approximately 8 weeks until the mocks, and I think that's a sensible amount of time to be preparing for these exams. Make sure that you're not focusing on any one particular subject for a large amount of time, but instead switching between subjects, and maybe 2 or 3 subjects per evening for a short study session would be sensible. And the video makes it clear that in between sessions, that offline time, the sleeping or resting, is actually a really important period for those memories to be encoded in the long-term memory. And the most important thing is not leaving it to the very last minute, trying to cram the night before and expecting that information to be available. Now, there's lots of advice online about how to create a revision timetable, and it's one of those things that you could spend a huge amount of time planning out exactly where you're going to study each topic and when before the mocks. And that's fine if that's something you would like to do. However, often it can be a little bit counterproductive to spend a large amount of time planning, which takes away from time from actually revising. So a simple plan like the one on screen, where you're switching between subjects regularly, tackling 2 or 3 subjects per evening and giving yourself some time off in the week as well, is a good balance. Now that's a quick way to get started in terms of your revision plan. But if you do want to plan in more detail, of course, that's fine. Okay, so how do we create a revision resource, a flashcard perhaps? Well, on screen is a section of a revision guide. It's got some information about chemistry in there. Now, what we need to avoid doing is just simply looking at that, reading it and highlighting it, and thinking that is an effective way to remember it. Actually, what we need to do is, yes, read and highlight, but then think about how we can turn that information into some useful self-test material. So here we have information on thermal decomposition reactions with probably 2 key pieces of information contained on screen. It tells us that a decomposition reaction is when a substance breaks down into simpler substances. That's something we may need to know and have that in our long-term memory, and that most decomposition reactions need heat to happen, and that this is called a thermal decomposition. That's not something I was aware of until I'd read that, but now we need to think about how we create a revision resource which helps us to test ourselves on that material and trying to remember it. So once I've read the material, I can then turn it into a flashcard, and here I have turned the things that I've read, and I haven't just copied them down, I've turned them into study questions. So this is one side of a flashcard in which I have the question, and on the reverse I would perhaps have the answer to that. So when I'm asking myself that question, I would have a go at defining decomposition and then checking on the reverse that I've done that. Now remember, from the video it states that it doesn't matter if you don't remember 100% of the information, but that it's that process of trying to recall it which is the important one. A question we're often asked is, do the mocks count towards my final grade? Well, there is some important information that we need to make students and parents aware of, that actually in some circumstances the mock examinations could count towards the final grade. For students in Year 11, and because of the pandemic, the government have asked us to treat mocks in a very specific way. They've asked us to ensure that students sit mock exams in proper exam conditions and that we keep the papers within the school. We also made students in Year 11 aware that should there be disruption to the public exams due to anything like a resurgence of COVID, then it's possible that those mock examinations would be used in place of a formal exam at the end. Now, it looks highly unlikely that will happen for the Year 11 year group, and actually the government haven't published guidance for Year 10 yet, but it is worth keeping in mind that that guidance is in place, and so it is important to treat the mocks seriously. For the last part of the presentation, I thought I'd just set out what to expect on the day of a mock exam. So students should gather in the canteen, and in the canteen on the wall will be displayed a seating plan where students can see their seat letter and number. This is also available on EduLink, so if students would prefer to check before they arrive at school, that's also something that they can do. When they enter the exam room, they'll find their exam paper with their name on the desk, and they'll need to enter the room in silence, facing the front and not communicating with any other students. It's worth bearing in mind that you'll be in a different seat almost every time, and you won't be in a consistent seat, so make sure that you do remember that seat before you arrive at the exam hall. In order to have a smooth start to the exam, we ask that students arrive correctly dressed. Full school uniform with blazers. The Uplands logo is allowed on clothing, but no other logos, so students should not arrive with any clothes with any writing upon them. Coats, hoodies and scarves should be left in the baggage room. That's particularly relevant for the winter series of mocks. And it's important to ensure that there is no writing anywhere on wrists or hands or anywhere like that, as that could be considered malpractice. It's important that students bring their own equipment. They should have a couple of black pens, just so that in case one runs out, they've got another one spare. And there's a list there of the other materials. A really important one is the calculator. We don't give out material, we don't lend out material, and importantly, students need to know how to use their calculator. And the best way to do that is if they have the same one throughout the whole exam series. They can bring water in, but it must be a clear water bottle with no labels at all. There are some things you are not allowed to take into the exam hall, and that includes mobile phones, iWatches, MP3 or 4 players, or any other electronic item with a digital storage. Normal watches, bangles, bracelets, rings and necklaces should be removed and placed in school bags, and no items should be worn on the wrist whilst in the examination room. Anything like notes or revision sheets, they should all be placed in the students' bags, which are kept away from the exam room, and nothing like that should be in pockets at all. It's important to note that Uplands doesn't create its own rules for the exam hall. They're set out by the government via the JCQ and Ofqual. It's our responsibility to ensure that exams are held in correct conditions, and we will be inspected on this during the real exam series. So there is no talking or communicating with anybody whilst in the exam room. Students can speak to an invigilator, but to do that they should put their hand up and wait for the invigilator to come to them. When they've finished their paper, they should thoroughly check their paper and check it again, but once complete they should remain in silence. They are in exam conditions until they are dismissed from that room, and we ask that students don't cause any distractions like clicking pens or tapping, because that can be distracting for other students. It's important not to doodle or write anything which is not related to the exam on exam papers, and it's important to note that highlighters should not be used on any answers. If everybody follows those rules, then the environment in the exam room is generally very calm, very focused, and it allows students to do their best. And that's it. If you have any questions, you can use the email which is displayed on the screen, but use the next sort of week to 10 days to start to get some of your materials, your revision guides together, get a rough plan in place, and see if you can start revising from the 29th of April, which gives you 8 weeks until those exams. Best of luck. Thank you.